Jeffrey the Greek joins us now. How are you, sir?
I'm great, guys. How are you?
Cannot complain. You're here. What else could I ask for?
Wow, you need to raise your expectations a little bit is what I'm thinking, Jim.
Well, I'm trying to go into this weekend with low expectations and just see what happens. Right.
So do we have good-natured Jim, or do we have crusty Croyle here on Friday?
I think it's good-natured so far. Nothing else, nothing to get my dander up yet. But we can always change that, baby.
For the record, I thought crusty Croyle was very entertaining.
Oh, it can be. You can't just bring him out of the box all the time, though.
No, and that's a play on words. With I know you guys are friends with Dustin Schutte. When Schutte gets fired up, we call him Spicy Schutte. So Spicy Schutte and Crusty Coral, they're two good people.
Yeah, man, he's a good one. He's on yesterday. I wish that would be funny to have this. That would be a threesome of epic proportions.
If we ever get that done, it needs to be recorded inside a drinking establishment. Would be the best way to do that, I think.
You know what? Next year for the college football signing day.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah. I mean, Big Ten in review, man. This would have been a good year to do it, let me tell you, because speaking of Mr. West, Mr. Big Ten West, I have a bone to pick with you.
Here we go.
Yeah. You all are sucking butt in the recruiting. Every Big Ten East team is just
incorrect,
top, man. Minus Iowa. Iowa.
Yeah, there you go. Hey, I just worry about
minus one Iowa.
I can only control one program.
I get that, but here we go again. We've had this discussion before, and now it's like, okay, guys, how long is the Big Ten going to go along with its head in the sand?
So this is where we're going. We're going to start this out. All right.
This is where we're going, baby.
Jim woke up and chose violence today, so let's do it. I'm fine with it. So I mean, first of all, anybody that's overreacting to the recruiting rankings, it's kind of sounds like my 6-year-old. When like you take something away from them, it's just something. It's only for like a short period of time, but the overreaction to it is immense. That's kind of what it was yesterday. Or 2 days ago, when for a while the East had all 7 teams, the top 7 teams were all East teams. This has happened probably once in the last, 15 years that it's happened. So I think we're overreacting to one thing. I mean, first of all,
how many times has the West won the Big Ten championship?
All right, so you want to go recruiting Big Ten West versus East, or do you want to go the game? You can't switch up on me here. Which one do you want?
One leads to the other, my friend. Okay. One leads to the other.
So let me say this: as far as the recruiting, if we do the recruiting like we're doing it now, for the next 100 years, Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State are always going to be 1, 2, and 3. That's never going to change. It never has changed. It's never been a big deal in the past. The difference is you see Mel Tucker taking a much different approach to recruiting than the previous regime. Obviously Michigan State was always kind of right around Wisconsin and Iowa, maybe even Minnesota for the recruiting rankings. And then typically we have seen Nebraska up into the top 20 for recruiting rankings. They were usually the 4th or 5th Big Ten team. But we've got all kinds of interesting things that are happening right now. Namely, Nebraska is obviously in a weird, funky situation where they basically have, for lack of a better term, dead man walking at coach. So it's very hard to recruit in. So that was something that drug Nebraska down to historically low recruiting numbers that we're looking at now. And then you got Mel Tucker, who's the new hotness. The new hot girl in class. So that was always a bump in recruiting, and he's doing a good job of capitalizing on it. That's not any kind of negative comment towards that. And Iowa made a late push, on the last day. Phil Parker, I had a chance to talk to him about this for just a hot minute last year. They like to hold on to their recruits until the last minute because they get tired of other teams poaching them once they recruit guys. So they flipped 3 guys that morning, all defensive backs, So, and then the late signing of Xavier Wampa, who's a 5-star in some websites. So all of these things kind of happened, this year. I think it's something that's more finite to this year, but don't stop people from using it and as something to talk about for the East versus West. So I guess I don't 100% blame people for jumping all over it either.
Well, Rutgers, how about Rutgers being up there? Rutgers is in front of every other West team except for Iowa, I think.
Yep. I mean, I'll put money, I'll put money on it right now that over the next 5 years, Rutgers will not finish above Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin. I would even put Minnesota in there. But again, Schiano is doing work, man. I mean, but there's going to have to be wins that are going to follow it pretty soon. And I just like to say right now, I mean, I'll throw it out there, but who would you rather have? The recruiting class that Loxley can bring in at Maryland, but then gets coached by Loxley's staff, or the talent that Minnesota and Wisconsin bring in, but then get coached by the Minnesota and Wisconsin staffs? I mean, what would you rather have? Because I saw a lot of examples of the Big Ten West beating the heck out of Maryland this year, and then Illinois should have got them. Recruiting rankings are extremely important. We put a little too much emphasis on classes. I'm going to say 10 to 30, okay? Because if you're in the top echelon, right, the top level to get the 5-star and 4-stars, there's no denying that those classes lead to higher talent, and typically those teams, get to the college football playoff. Once you get past 10, I would even maybe say 8 or 9, the difference between a class ranked 10th and a class ranked 26th is so small. Like, it's so minute, the difference between those classes. It really comes down to coaching and scheme after that.
One thing I wondered about is that talking about Nebraska and how much they struggled because it seemed like Frost is not long for that job. I figured that was part of the reason that they went and basically said he's coming back next year as early as they did, in the hopes of salvaging this class. And it seems like it didn't work. So I'm wondering whether that changes the calculus at all for them going forward.
I mean, it's a great point. I'm sure. I think if Trev Alberts, the AD at Nebraska, if you asked him, he probably put, the old-fashioned, Excel spreadsheet together, pluses and minuses of bringing Scott Frost back or letting him go. That would be on the plus side, is to try to maintain recruiting. But I think there were so many factors in play. Namely, I think he knew how crazy the offseason was going to be for the coaching carousel. And let's be honest, Nebraska right now is not at the top of the list for some of these hot coaching candidates, both head coach and coordinators. Like that secondary market for the coordinators is just as competitive, if not more. So I think Trev Alberts is a smart dude and understood that they were going to be, one arm time behind their back in the fight. So that was the reason they kept Frost around. And then, they have been close. I know probably Nebraska fans are as tired of hearing that as anybody, but they have been close. So maybe now is not the time to move away.
They're going to have to hit the transfer portal hard. I wonder if they'll try to go basically the Michigan State route from last year and try to build almost exclusively through the transfer portal this offseason.
That's another great point, because a lot of times you can get a senior, sometimes a super senior that's only got a year left anyways. So even if it doesn't work out from that senior's point of view, no skin off their back. So I think that's a good point. Quarterback would be my guess for their number one need, because Mark Whipple over from Pittsburgh, I mean, that's a completely different style of offense that Scott Frost in Nebraska is moving to. It's a more, vertical downfield offense where you need, you're going to take shots on the outside to test the defense out there. You saw that with Pittsburgh this year. I'm not saying they don't have that quarterback. I think maybe they can, but he's very young. Harburg, he's like the third string quarterback. So my guess is that would be the position they look at. And the one that I've where there seems to be the most smoke and fire is Keaton Slovis from Southern Cal. That's not anything official right now, but that's one to keep an eye on.
How about this alignment? I like this. Michael Kolak's tried a north-south alignment with Minnesota, Wisconsin, Northwestern, Michigan State, Michigan, Iowa, and Rutgers. And the South would be Indiana, Purdue, Illinois, Ohio State, Nebraska, Maryland, and Penn State.
No offense to whoever wrote that, but that's junk. That's never going to work for me.
Why?
I'm pretty passionate about this. Like, okay, we are the Big Ten. We are the Big Ten. All right. This is the premier conference in the country. The SEC is the SEC. I understand that. But when you're talking current powers with traditional powers, like going back to World War I and II, the Big Ten is the Big Ten. All right. We are not playing Ohio State and Michigan 2 weeks in a row. That is disgusting. That makes me.
Who said you have to play them? You have to play them 2 weeks in a row.
Yes, you do. If you do, that makes my college football soul want to lurch and puke when I hear that. Okay, Ohio State and Michigan are. If there's only two ways to do it, you go back to a round robin tournament where you completely eliminate divisions, but but don't play a Big Ten championship, okay, which we all know is not going to happen because the Big Ten is not going to give up that money, okay? The other way to do it, which is the more practical way, you do the divisions, but you keep Ohio State and Michigan in the same division, okay? You have to keep them in the same division. They play the last week of the season because that's how God intended it. And then they don't replay the next week. I mean, we've had the Big 12 play Oklahoma, State could replay, Oklahoma, Texas could replay in the Big 12 championship. That is disgusting, okay? And then second to that, I would put Michigan and Michigan State right there. I know they play earlier in the year, but winning those regular season games is supposed to mean something. You win that regular season game, that fan base has bragging rights for the whole year. Michigan won the Big Ten championship. They only lost one game. What was that one game? Michigan State. That ignites the fire for a whole year because Michigan says, we don't care. We won the Big Ten championship. And Michigan State says, ha, 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 that's great, but we beat your ass. Like that is what makes this sport great. You are going to strip the Big Ten Conference of that prestige if you start messing with these divisions too much. So I will not change my stance on this. It's ridiculous. Now, my idea is very simple. Send Penn State to the west and Purdue to the east. Now you've got Purdue and Indiana in the same division, so they play at the end of the year. You keep that the same. You have a balance of power. When we talked earlier about the top three teams in recruiting, always going to be Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. Typically, lately, it's been Ohio State, Penn State, and then Michigan for the recruiting. So you would put the second or third, historically talented recruiting into the West and then move one that's, obviously historically low into the East. That is the closest we can get to the balance of power. Penn State has a little bit of rivalry with Ohio State and Michigan, but this is not like a generational rivalry that Penn State has with anybody. So that to me makes the most sense. I am sorry to get up on my box here, and I usually don't talk this long without interruption, but anyways, that's my thoughts on something I'm very passionate about.
It's great. We just have to take a break. Dylan Sin was with me from the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette, and Grouchy the Greek is here as well. We're back with more Indiana Sports Speak Radio right after this.